Final Fantasy may be the most influential role-playing game ever, and on this crazy journey, we're taking a look at this juggernaut of a franchise, game by game, in numerical order, until I either run out of games, get bored, or die. I'm betting on the latter. Welcome to the Fractured Games Final Fantasy Retrospective. Final Fantasy V came out in 1992 for the Super Famicom in Japan, but never saw the light of day in the States until the anthology release for the PS1 7 years later. Like Final Fantasy III, V uses the job system, which makes me wonder if it was just a coincidence that 2 of the 3 Final Fantasies not to originally be ported to the States use this system. It certainly adds a level of complexity to be able to customize and create whatever kind of party you want. That level of choice and freedom, though, easily makes it one of my favorite systems in any RPG. So it's a shame Final Fantasy V has fallen into obscurity like the other early Final Fantasy ports. It also started series traditions seen commonplace in later games, like the active battle system, visible turn counters, and a wider array of character animations and interactions. As for the story, the tale begins in a pretty familiar fashion for Final Fantasy. The world contains crystals, and there's something up with them. In this case, they power the 4 elements and are beginning to lose power and break apart. This story starts with Princess Rina seeing her father off as he goes to check on the wind crystal. Shortly after, the winds stop completely and the crystal shatters. Enter our main hero, Butts. Yeah, the English translation, the main character's name is commonly known as Bartz, but some suggest that in the Japanese version, it's Butts. So for the sake of pissing off any hardcore fans, he's Butts. Butts with a Z, or Z. He and his faithful chocobo, Boko, investigate a meteor crash that landed nearby, where 2 goblins are playing tug-of-war with an unconscious Rina. She skedaddled to find out what happened to her father, and together they come across an old man with amnesia named Galif. I'm sure his backstory won't be of any importance later. All he knows is that he was on his way to the Wind Shrine, same as Rina. Butts decides to tag along because, what the heck, I guess. Butts is an interesting beginning character for a Final Fantasy, because for the first time you get a reluctant hero. Butts doesn't have any illusions of grandeur or manifest destiny tying him down, though of course we'll find out later that he is at least related to someone of importance. But he doesn't really seem that interested in going on an adventure at first, and is just kind of thrust into it. Which kind of makes me wonder what Butts' whole deal was before the meteor fell. Was he just tramping around the world with nothing to do before an adventure just fell into his lap? Regardless, he helps lead Galif and Rina to the Wind Shrine while getting flack from Galif for his clear romantic interest for the girl he just met. So at least we've got the awkward relationship crap out of the way. Shortly after, though, the group runs afoul a band of pirates and their fearsome Captain Ferris. Oh yeah, if Final Fantasy's taught me anything, it's that right into pirates usually results in a good old smackdown. Or they get thrown in the brig instantly and are eventually allowed free passage to the Wind Shrine because Ferris and Rina share a similar pendant. Yeah, I didn't see that coming. In a cool attention to detail, Rina points out how they can't sail because the wind has completely died, to which Ferris introduces everyone to Hydra, the sea beast that pulls the ship along wind-free. So, that's neat. At the Wind Shrine, things seem off, as the place is full of monsters, and we learn from the king's subjects that Rina's father went to the top of the shrine but hasn't come back down. After fighting off Big Bird at the top of the tower, they don't find the king, but they do find the shattered remains of the Wind Crystal, where I guess they're deemed the Warriors of Light via the Crystal Essences, whatever that means. Courage, the essence of fire. Hope, the essence of earth. Kindness, the essence of water. Wait, no, hold on. Kindness, the essence of water? What the hell does that even mean? What about water is kind? Quest, the essence of wind? They're just making shit up, aren't they? I guess the reason they couldn't find the king is because he's now a ghost, who explains that the other 3 crystals need to be saved. But, more importantly, the crystal shards imbue the heroes with their first set of jobs: Knight, Monk, Blue Mage, Thief, Black Mage, and White Mage. Oh man, this is what it's all about right here. Loading your blank slate heroes up to be a kick-ass fighting force. But I made a Blue Mage as a means to test the new class out. Rena floated between Black and White Mages. Galuf became a Monk, and Ferris... I honestly didn't know what to do with Ferris at the time. The job system in 5 works much the same way as it did in 3, where the character's level and their job level are 2 different things, and each character has 2 slots that can be equipped with abilities gained from leveling the jobs, leading to any number of combinations, like a healer monk or a black mage that can steal. Again, just the sheer amount of possibilities this kind of RPG system grants you, it makes it one of the most fun systems of any game. And I think is why, and much more so than when I played Final Fantasy III, I found myself playing around with job combinations and trying to tweak the party into my vision for the ultimate team. From here on, I will always have each character messing around with multiple jobs at once, with the exception of Galuf. And this kind of RPG system makes combat more of an exciting test run of your party than just a mere obstacle to overcome. Like these nut eaters. Yeah, okay. Also, I like the yes at the end of every fight. And it's pretty funny. Anyway, next town the pirates take to the pub, where Butts gets a lap dance. And the party checks in on a sleeping Ferris, where we get this weird scene. Making their way to the next crystal, Ferris decides to leave the pirates marooned in town, and just the 4 heroes sail onward, where, of course, there be monsters, named Soccer, for some reason, and Carl Boss. Hydra gets sucked up in Carl Boss's whirlpool, and the heroes are now stranded on a boat with no wind, where they run adrift in a ship graveyard and decide to dry off their wet clothes. Rena goes off into another room to change, and Ferris seems a bit reluctant, because it turns out Ferris is really a lady. It's actually a pretty interesting bit of plot development. Ferris had to hide her identity in order to make her way in the pirate world and be taken seriously. Though it does make me wonder what made Layla from Final Fantasy II so special then. Clearly not all fantasy worlds need to adhere to real-world historical accuracies, but it is interesting to think that Ferris's character was partly inspired by real-world pirate Mary Read, who also pretended to be a guy as a means to survive the harsh life at sea. At any rate, it adds to the depth of what used to be pretty static, one-dimensional characters, having them hold secrets and alluding to a troubled life. I guess that's what the weird scene at the inn was alluding to, but I still can't figure out what they were trying to convey. Does Ferris look pretty when she sleeps or something? Fun fact, Lady White Mages in this game have their hoods up, including Ferris before she's revealed as a woman. With Ferris's baggage safely stowed away between her legs, the heroes are beset upon by none other than a siren, which leads to an unexpected turn of events as she uses images of people from each member's life to lure them into her spell. But when it's attempted on Galuf, who has amnesia, he's completely immune and is able to snap the others out of it. Definitely a unique twist. The next obstacle in the hero's way is their inability to get to the next crystal in the Kingdom of Walls without the ability to fly. Fortunately, there's a mountain with Rena's family dragon resting on top of it, and the dragon's name is Dragon. Rena traverses poisonous flowers in order to help heal the dragon's wounds, but it's all okay because the dragon can heal poison, apparently. Almost like none of that was even necessary. Nah, but whatever. We've got a frickin' dragon now. So it's off to Walls and the water crystal. The crystal at Walls is connected by machines in order to help the kingdom prosper, But the heroes warn the king that the machines are probably gonna cause the crystal to shatter, like the wind one did. But first, we gotta check out what's going on in this castle's basement. Okay, fine. I won't check out the basement. I'll just go up this tower instead. Did I miss a couple of dungeons or something? That's an issue I have with this game. Much like in Final Fantasy II, you can find yourself in unwinnable situations where it's hard to tell if you've just accidentally stumbled upon something for later in the game, or you just happen to be woefully incompetent and falling behind the game's pace. So before the king can have his say about the water crystal, another meteor strikes nearby Wall's tower. And guess what's sitting at the top of that tower? So of course the monsters have now started to run amok, and the heroes fight their way to the water crystal, which is being accosted by Snuffleupagus. Despite defeating the creature without it laying a hand or, I guess, snout on the crystal, it shatters anyway, and a mysterious soldier who seems to know Galuf tells us to get to the fire crystal before passing away. I mean, yeah man, we know. Played Final Fantasy before. And now for the new crystal shards. Berserker, Red Mage, Summoner, Sorcerer, Time Mage, and the hell? I can't reach this crystal shard. Why put one there in the first place then? Why'd he gotta be such a tease? Seriously, it's gonna bug the hell out of me that it's there and I can't reach it. Well, the tower sinks into the sea and Hydra reappears to eat everyone. I mean, save them before dying, for some reason. Sorry, can't be sad. New jobs. Speaking of the new jobs, I honestly just sat them out for the time being. At this point, none of my characters seem to have reached their full potential with the jobs I gave them. Butts as a blue mage so far has only learned one enemy spell, which is to flash the enemies. Didn't know I needed magic to do that. And Rena, I just have no idea what to do with. I've been playing around with her going thief to see what fun items I can steal, and even had her dabble in the red mage to have both black and white magic available, but that also didn't seem like the best use for her turn in combat. I don't want to rely on white magic as a crutch, but I mean, you saw that fight with Shiva. Galuf I had as a berserker for a time, which didn't offer much in the way of learning new abilities. And really, the only character to get a significant job change is Ferris, as my dedicated summoner, with the ability to summon Chocobo, Sylph, and Remora, of whom I have no idea what they're supposed to do. If it's supposed to be an instant kill, it never once worked for me. Also, Ferris is going to be able to summon Shiva. Eventually. So now it's off to Karnak, where the fire crystal resides, and also the site of another meteor crash. That is, once I figure out how the hell to get off this part of the map. Turns out the meteor by the tower, that, by the way, didn't have a hole in it before the whole water crystal event took place, now has a hole in it, and a teleporter sitting conveniently inside. Obviously. Once at Karnak, it looks like the heroes are too late. The fire crystal has already set the whole village on fire. Oh, or this is just normal. As one villager points out, the fire crystal made this a great town. Okay, but why is it on fire? We also learn that the one responsible for making the machines that amplify the crystal's power is one Professor Sid. At the weapon shop, we get mistaken as a meteor monster, which is a fair assumption, as we did just crawl out of a meteor crater, and promptly sent to prison alongside Sid, who had been jailed for attempting to destroy his crystal boosting machines that he realized was going to cause the whole crystal to shatter. So the heroes and Sid find that they're on the same page and need to do all they can to save the other crystals from shattering. Butts explains that he was told of his quest by a talking crystal shard, and somehow Sid doesn't find this concerning. At that moment, the King's Chancellor shows up. Ah, well, yep, he's evil. I'm calling it now. He's definitely evil, just like every other Chancellor in these games. Oh, well, he just came to tell Sid that he was right about the machines being bad and is generally an alright guy. Okay, so I was wrong, again, about an evil Chancellor, but I'm still not letting my guard down. That's how they get you. This news arrives due to the fire crystal beginning to show signs of cracking. Sid figures that the only thing left that could still be draining power from the crystal is the kingdom's fire ship. I like how Sid demands the Chancellor let the heroes help him deal with this problem, then tells the heroes he's going on ahead without them to the fire ship, saying that it's very dangerous. Right, okay, so why are you going there without us? I guess he wouldn't have appreciated Butts' attempt at learning piano in the pub. Turns out there's this whole side quest in this game with the pianos, where if you play each one, you eventually get good enough to perform. And then, if you perform that to a certain bard, you get a powerful bard spell. And I'm only bringing this up now because I ended up missing all but one piano by the end of the game, and didn't want to run around trying to figure out which one I missed. And I'm kind of regretting that now. But bards are lame anyway, so whatever. Also, the magic shop sells ice too, which, you know, fire ship. But first I had to get some money. Oh, and they sell cure too and raise as well? Aw, hell. Alright, so finally the heroes are ready to help Sid with the fire ship, assuming he hasn't turned to ash while waiting for us after all this time. And I decided to change Butts into a sorcerer, which grants him the ability to imbue his sword with magic, including ice. So it's safe to say that we're as prepared as we possibly can be. Dear lord, that's a lot of freaking damage. The boss of the fire ship, who was really a possessed queen of Karnak, explains that the machines aren't what's destroying the crystals. Something evil's a-brewing, and the heroes need to make it to the fire crystal post-haste. There we run into a wolf named the Wolf, who seems to know Galuf as well. While they chat it up, another possessed person arrives to destroy the fire crystal. Wolf sacrifices himself so the party can escape the ensuing explosion. Gee, it was nice knowing you, Wolf. I guess. But whatever, more crystal shards. Except Rena says because the crystal is gone, the entire castle is now gonna blow as well. Oh god, a time limit? Quick, take all the castle's treasures! Shit, you can't even use the menu to pause the timer? Who are we even fighting in these encounters anyway? The soldiers who are defending the castle? Well, that's a bad look. No, not the crystal shards. Oh, thank God they're safe. The new jobs this time are Trainer, Geomancer, and Ninja. Ninja definitely seems like the natural progression to Galuf's monk job. And since I still have no idea what I'm doing with Reyna, Geomancer seems as good an option as any. Though I think for some reason I still kept her on the red mage path, despite later realizing it was a stupid choice and scrapping it all together for her. Anyway, that just leaves the trainer job, and I have no freaking clue how to use it, so I dumped it on Ferris. The idea is that the job has the ability to control monsters in a fight, and have free reign on their abilities, which is actually a solid way to teach blue mages new spells. It can also capture a monster and release it on enemies in a different battle. So basically, it's Pokemon. Despite the destruction and failure left in the wake of the heroes, they push on to reach the Earth Crystal before it, too, gets destroyed. I'm sure this time things will turn out totally different. First stop is at the Library of Ancients, where we meet Sid's grandson, the Mid, who has gotten himself into trouble with a load of old books, one of which has Ifrit trapped inside for some odd reason. Unlike Shiva, the party was somehow better prepared this time around. Probably because he's needed in order to progress through this talking bookshelf. Which, I mean, yeah, I'd be intimidated by a fire demon too if I were a bookshelf. So he saved Mid from a bunch of old books, and he explains that he found a way to power the fire ship without using the fire crystal. An engineer named Sid, working on a ship, huh? Yeah, sounds like we're about to get airborne. Oh, wait, no, it's just a normal ship. Well, that's lame. The reunion of Sid and Mid also brings back some of Galuf's memories, like the fact that he's from another planet, and entered ours via one of the meteorites. Yeah, I don't think Galuf has amnesia. I think he's just concussed. And so it's off on a sailing adventure. Oh, well, never mind then. Yeah, almost instantly I stumble on an island, and as soon as we set foot on it, an earthquake happens and destroys the damn ship. But in a nearby forest, we find a black chocobo, who swallowed some of the crystal shards from the Karnak explosion containing the Bard and the Hunter. Weird. But anyway, black chocobo. In later Final Fantasy installments, these guys are a pain in the ass to get, and the music here is just awesome. With our new amigo, we can do some fun side quests, like find an old man in the woods and beat him up. Nah, I'm just kidding, that's Rama. We need him for our summoner, which would have been a smooth fight if I didn't forget I equipped Rena with a lightning bow. Ingenious move on my part. And now we can visit Butts' hometown and get some Butts backstory. Butts' mom, Stella, died shortly after he was born, and his dad, Drogon, died when he was little. He finds a music box in his old house, which presents a flashback of him and both of his parents. And he's not a newborn. Alright, well maybe I'm being too much of a stickler here, or maybe it's just a bad translation, but yeah, he definitely stated that his mom died not long after he was born. And yet he still has memories of her, so, you know, it wasn't that shortly after. Anyway, he recalls a conversation his parents had about his dad needing to leave to go on some sort of conquest, but that's when his mom falls ill. Hey, in a neat addition, the person now living in Butts' old house is a bard, and teaches a bard song to the party after being inspired by the music box's melody. In fact, the only way to get new songs for the bard job is to come across other bards on the world map. It's a pretty neat mechanic, and I'm kind of kicking myself now for not ever bothering with it. But, I mean, there's just so many jobs. From Butts' reminiscing, we also learn that Ferris has a bit of a complex when it comes to fathers, and we learn why not too long after, as our next stop is the Kingdom of Tycoon, where we learn that Rena, who's the princess of Tycoon, has a long-lost sister. Yeah, it's Ferris. Actually, her real name is Salsa. Yes. Salsa. Salsa was presumed lost at sea when a ship she was on sank, which means Ferris getting enchanted by the siren earlier when the vision of the king showed up was a nice little bit of foreshadowing. Speaking of the King of Tycoon, he's recently been spotted in the desert of Sandtides, where Sid and Mid get the brilliant idea of summoning sandworms for us to slaughter and use their corpses as bridges over the tricky terrain. That's pretty fucking hardcore. At least we didn't have to slaughter sand bears. Those guys are adorable. Past the Sandtides are some ruins, and what looks to be the King of Tycoon, but whoops, it was a trap. It's in these rooms that you really start to see the steampunk and sci-fi aspect of the game start to take shape. It's no longer just one quick trip to the moon on a spaceship, but rather elements present throughout the whole game. In a pretty contrived sequence, the party gets teleported under the island we found the Black Chocobo at, while Sid and Mid simultaneously decide to return said Chocobo to that island, then fall through the earth where they all meet up in some underground chamber containing an airship. But I guess I can't complain. We've got an airship now. And this time we can actually fly past the mountaintops. For some reason, the dragon and Black Chocobo can't do that. Maybe it's all the crap we're carrying in our pockets. With the new ship, we can finally make our way to the Earth Crystal. I mean, it wasn't like we're in some kind of hurry and the entire planet is at stake or anything. So a floating fortress appeared where the ruins used to be, and Sid and Mid have the scoop that the Earth Crystal resides in the fortress, and was what makes it float. But the machine powering the crystal was turned off, meaning someone must have turned it back on. So it's time to assault the flying fortress on an airship, leading to a pretty cool bit where we have to attack the defense turrets individually as mini-bosses. And you could even see the airship in the background of the fights. I wonder how we're gonna get back on it. Inside the fortress proper, I keep forgetting I gave Rena a healing staff, and keep accidentally healing enemies with her standard attack. More importantly, Salsa and Rena's dad is there, and totally not brainwashed, and asks us to kill the Shrine Guardian, allowing him to destroy the crystal and... oh, he was brainwashed. But a blonde girl named Kryl arrives just in time to save the party. Kryl, we find out, is Galif's granddaughter, and her sudden and dramatic appearance jogs his memory. The king's brainwashing has also been lifted, and he finally gets to see his daughter Salsa after so many years. But these touching reunions are interrupted as the Earth Crystal shatters and X-Death appears. Him and his rad as hell theme song. He doesn't stick around, however, and Rena and Salsa's dad dies, inexplicably. But once again, I'm too excited for new Crystal Shard jobs to care. This time it's Samurai, Chemist, and Lancer, also known as Frickin' Dragoon. Yeah, definitely something we're putting on butts. The sprite even looks like Kane from Final Fantasy IV. With Galif's memory back, he explains how X-Death was an evil mage from his home planet, and Galif, as well as 3 other Dawn warriors, trapped him on our planet, using the power of the 4 crystals to keep him contained. But due to the crystal shattering from being used for energy, he was subsequently freed, and Galif had returned to our planet via meteorite in order to stop his release. So yeah, Galif's an alien. With this, Galif and his granddaughter Kryl head back to their home planet without the other heroes, and there's no way for Butts and Co. to follow them. The end. Or you can go visit with Sid and Mid, who help restore the power of the other meteorites, and follow Galif and Kryl to outer space. Their meddling, though, ends up unleashing Titan, who the party only managed to defeat thanks to Butts being in midair for half the battle. Real asshole, this guy. Restoring the power to all meteors creates a warp point on the map, which our brave heroes dive into with reckless abandon, flinging them into the distant world of, I don't know, some such. Shortly after, the group gets kidnapped and placed in X-Death's castle. X-Death then uses the bat signal to convince Galif to surrender, as Galif's forces and X-Death's minions are currently embroiled in an epic battle. Galif hops on a dragon and rides to the hero's rescue alone. Fortunately, I have Galif as a samurai, since he was a ninja before, samurai being the natural evolution of a ninja. Galif comes face to face with Gilgamesh, X-Death's right-hand man, and it's an intense samurai-on-samurai duel. Yeah, I just threw money at him. That was easy. The heroes escape to face Gilgamesh once again, who, like a smelly copycat, proceeds to jump on everyone. Hey, that's Butts' job. X-Death powers some sort of barrier around his castle and launches the heroes hundreds of miles into the wild wilderness of the planet. After a little exploring, the party finds a Moogle. After being strangely absent in 4 and only having a bit part in 3, they're finally moving up in the world as Final Fantasy NPCs. Case in point, this one here needs to be saved from a Tyrannosaurus. Doing so convinces him to show us the location of the Moogle forest. And also, Rena learned Find Hole. Actually, it does exactly what you think it does. The Geomancer class is just as overpowered as it was in Final Fantasy III, but the side abilities are pretty much useless, I find. I also wasn't paying attention to where the Moogle went and got lost in a desert full of sandcrawlers, who I don't think I was meant to fight because they took forever to go down. Eventually, the Moogle village is located, and we can dress like a Moogle, loot all their earthly treasures, have another Moogle hit on us, and conveniently, have the Moogle we saved telepathically communicate with the Moogle hanging out with Kryl back at Galif's kingdom to tell her where her father and co are located. Oh yeah, not only is Galif an alien, but also a king of this planet. Go figure. Butts certainly has a hard time coming to terms with this. It's at Galif's castle that we finally find the teleport spell, which is for time mages, which I haven't had anyone learn yet. Ah, crap. I guess that's a Rena job. Who's now juggling that over being a Geomancer, Black Mage, and White Mage? I can't argue with the results, though. A Samurai Galif hasted by a Time Mage is a sexy combo. And I decided to switch Ferris over to Dancer just to see what that job was like. Supposedly, they can thwart an attack by arousing the enemy. Oh my. After fighting off an offensive force by X-Death, I mean, really, these guys are quite rude, the heroes make their way to the Valley of Dragons and find grass that would cure the kingdom's dying dragon. On the way, finding a village run by Kelgo, one of the Dawn Warriors who fought X-Death with Galuf, but he figures the heroes for X-Death's cronies, but's deciding this is a man-to-man fight to prove they're not the bad guys for some reason. But despite Kelga's fancy moves, Butts has seen enough Dragon Ball Z to lay the smackdown. Leaving the old hero bedridden. Yeah, great job there, Butts. It's here we learn that Butts' father, Drogon, was also one of the Dawn Warriors who helped defeat X-Death, and was actually opposed to the plan to trap X-Death on Earth, or whatever planet we started on, staying behind to watch the seal holding the evil force and eventually starting a family. Anyway, the Valley of Dragons, pretty standard mountain climbing dungeon fare, and the heroes collect the dragon grass at the top after a little intensive pruning, beginning to see a pattern regarding climbing mountains to heal a dragon. Actually, there's more to this mountain than that. There's this interesting encounter you can get where a golem is being attacked by monsters. Helping him out gives you his summon, which is an incredibly useful physical shield. It can be tough to keep the Rockman alive though. Having Ferris's tamer job was key in pacifying the monsters long enough to kill them. With the grass, the dragon is now healed, but for some reason, Kryl is now bedridden and is talking nonsense about a sage named Gil. The heroes take the dragon to see him, but X-Death sinks the island into the ocean. Well, maybe Kryl has a better idea since she told us to go see the sage. Nope, now she isn't going to be any help at all. That's just great. After consulting a walkthrough, the heroes suddenly get the idea to go see the fourth Dawn Warrior we haven't been introduced to yet, named Zeza, who's planning an all-out sea attack on X-Death's pad. The heroes join the fleet just in time to help against X-Death's counterattack led by our old pal Gilgamesh. After thwarting the dude, again, Zeza lets the heroes in on his plans to destroy X-Death's shield with a submarine, and is even nice enough to offer them some rest on the sub, which looks like just a couple of metal chairs. That can't be comfortable. So they bust into one of the towers powering the barrier, and Zeza goes downstairs to shut down the power, while the party make their way up to the antenna to destroy it. Unfortunately, the antenna is being protected by some eldritch horror called a Tomos, who rains hellfire on the entire party. Honestly, I don't know how you're supposed to be prepared for this fight.
It all just comes down to being lucky. Have I mentioned this game can be hard?
Eventually the antenna is blown, but Zeza gets trapped inside the power room. Galuf decides not to hop on the dragon and flee, and instead tries to go save Zeza. Butts holds him back while telling Rena, "You and the others go first." Others? You mean Ferris? Zeza promises Galuf that he'll meet them back at the sub, but we actually see him confess to no one in particular that this was a suicide mission for him from the start. It's a pretty touching end, if only we had enough time to give a crap about him as a character. But the shield around X-Death's castle is down, and we now have a sub, which we should take to the Sage Gil's cave that apparently exists. Maybe the sage can heal Galuf of his sad sackery. In the cave, the heroes find a turtle, who Butts decides to punch. Yeah, Butts, what the hell? Turns out this turtle is Gil the Sage, who wastes no time in explaining that X-Death was born in Moor Forest, therefore he's probably going to be looking for something in said forest. He points out that X-Death was sealed within a tree there for 500 years, until breaking out. The Dawn Warriors then fought him and sealed him in the crystals, of which he, again, broke out. So this time Gil suggests we should just destroy him instead of, sealing him up in some contrived way. Yeah, sage advice if I've ever heard it. So it's a trip through the maze-like dark forest of Moor. X-Death sets the place ablaze, and the heroes are rescued by Smokey the Moogle. And the game pulls an Earthbound here and makes you actually sit and wait for the coast to clear. This is a Nintendo game, and we're still in a forest, so obviously we need to enter another dang old tree. It never fails, I swear. Here, the heroes fight the 4 crystals? No, wait, it was a seal that X-Death tricked them into breaking and giving him power over the crystals? Are these the same crystals from Earth? Whatever. Dramatic stuff is happening. Kryl, once again, arrives to save the heroes.
Man, the amount of times Kryl saves the day. She might as well be a member of the party. A wink.
Her attempts to save them this time, however, doesn't go very well, and Galuf jumps in to finish the job, leading to a battle that continues even after Galuf's HP reaches 0. X-Death flees, and Galuf, after having a few parting words, blinks out of existence. That's right, Galuf is truly and totally dead. Not the first time in Final Fantasy history to have a main character pass on. Tella from Final Fantasy IV gets that honor. But in a game that wasn't full of fake-out deaths, like in 4, it comes as much more of a surprise. Mainly because it's so late in the game and the character had time to develop and have a full-fledged personality, making his death a bit more impactful in my opinion. And the build-up for his self-sacrifice had been there for a while in the story. Galuf's partners from his glory days dying one by one before his eyes. Though I find it funny that the heroes then attempt to revive him with magic and Phoenix Downs, which kind of raises some questions, like, why didn't they work? I always complained how little sense this made with Aeris's death too, but at least in Final Fantasy VII, they don't draw attention to it.
Galuf's death raises a pretty big issue as well. What about the equipment? Or all the job levels that I spent half the game building?
Well, conveniently, Galuf's spirit leaves behind some kind of trinket that gives Kryl all of Galuf's knowledge. So now our money-tossing samurai is a little blonde girl. This adds a character to our ranks that already has a vested role in the story and a hefty amount of development, as she reluctantly takes up the mantle of her grandfather and joins the world-saving adventurers as more than just a sideliner.
Honestly, of all the deaths of a main character in the Final Fantasy games, this one does it pretty well.
Next, it's off to storm X-Death's castle, but first I thought it would be interesting to check in with Kelga to see what he had to say about Galuf's death, but instead just got dialogue regarding Zeza's death. Whatever. Speaking of Kelga, he uses his last bit of power to break the illusion cast on X-Death's castle. Oh yeah, it's certainly a bit different looking. Oh, and now Kelga has a comment about Galuf. And, of course, this act of illusion breaking is enough to finally finish Kelga off for good too. Man, butts must have hit him really hard. You know, with all this moving flesh and moisture and decomposing body parts, one's liable to get an infection in this place. A carbuncle, if you will.
Yeah, but no, seriously, I've always wondered why in Final Fantasy games they named a mystical creature after a series of boils.
And I only recently learned that carbuncle is also the name of a small cut gemstone. So the name is a reference to the giant red thing on its forehead, but not the kind of giant red thing the name initially suggests. Carbuncle, like Golem, is a necessity to have in this game, as it casts Reflect on all party members. With him and Golem combined, you can actually survive some of the fights in this game. Imagine that.
Hey, have I mentioned that this game is hard?
So after yet another scrap with Gilgamesh, who even X-Death is sick of and sends to something called the End Zone, it's a showdown with X-Death proper, who, rather appropriately, casts death on party members, and not the instant kind either. It's the one where you have to wait for the countdown overhead to reach 0 and frantically try to get the character to do as much damage as possible before the inevitable. As I just mentioned, Carbuncle and Golem, they're your best friends in this. Defeating X-Death makes the crystals break. Again. Still don't know where these crystals came from or what they do exactly. But this causes all the heroes to wake up back on Earth for some reason. Maybe the talking turtle can explain what the hell is going on. There's actually a nice little bit of character building with Butts and Kryle at this point, as Chips and Salsa are roped into attending a celebration at Tycoon Castle, and Butts reunites with his trusty chocobo, Boko, who's taken a wife and gotten her pregnant during the time we'd been fucking about on another planet. Kryle teases Butts and saying she's surprised he can ride a bird, considering how scared he is of riding on a dragon, to which Butts body checks her. Careful, man. You already killed one major character with only a body slam. Also, the two fall into a pit and get attacked by an antlion, which seemed like a poorly veiled attempt at padding, especially since this is frickin' Final Fantasy we're talking about. Why is there padding? This game is long enough as it is. But anyway, Gil, doing his turtle thing,
Help, I'm a turtle and I can't get up!
explains that the two worlds have once again merged together, them having been separated thousands of years ago in an effort to prevent some abstract evil called the Void from spreading. And there's an evil dude back then called Enuo, or something, who isn't X-Death. He was destroyed, but the Void remained. The only thing to keep it at bay was to seal it in something called the End Zone, which is some other abstract thing that exists between two worlds. Hence the separation of our planet and the other one.
At least I think. Honestly, I'm still pretty confused by this plot.
Like, still, what were those other 4 crystals we encountered? Were there 2 sets of them? And what does any of this have to do with X-Death? You know, the evil we'd been fighting up to this point? Oh, and speaking of, he suddenly shows up during the exposition dump, having transformed himself into a thorn and sticking to Kryle. Right. He explains that his whole part in this story is that he's evil and wants to control the Void. And yeah, fair enough, I guess. And we watch as holes in the End Zone begin opening in the overworld, and the Void wipes entire parts of the map out of existence, including Tycoon Kingdom, where it's assumed Reno is still residing. Gil and X-Death have another Dragon Ball Z standoff, and bamfs the heroes out of there to send us on another quest. Stop X-Death from obtaining the power of the Void.
Quick! To the library!
Fortunately, the Dewey Decimal System never fails, and the heroes find just the book to defeat X-Death, which involves another hunt for elements of earth, wind, fire, and water. This time as clues to find 4 tablets that unseal the ancient weapons that defeated Enuo, and I guess by association can defeat X-Death as well. Oh yeah, and the spells Holy, Flare, and the Bahamut Summon. Yeah, they might be useful to have too. So the party, minus Rena, heads off to a desert temple, and boy is Rena's absence felt during this part. It was actually kind of fun trying to survive a dungeon on nothing but my wits and a very limited supply of healing items, because Rena was my dedicated white mage. So when Ferris got turned into a zombie, I had no spells to heal her, nor did I have any holy water on hand. That and this temple had the weird gimmick of having enemies you can actually see on the map. And it was genuinely stressful trying to avoid these super tough robot things. It actually made the whole temple feel like an old-fashioned dungeon crawl, where I wasn't just going through the motions, but actually trying to prepare myself for obstacles and measuring the risks of going off the beaten path. The heroes also encounter this crazy bastard called the Bludgeoner, who seemed kind of familiar, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, until after I beat him and he mentioned that he has a brother out there somewhere. Oh yeah, it's one of the brothers summons from Final Fantasy VIII.
Apparently they started in Final Fantasy V. Crazy, right? I think so.
After feeling like I actually deserved the award given to me by a Final Fantasy game, the heroes obtain the first of the lithographs, which I guess turns an entire peninsula into the Dragon Bahamut, who tells us he'll be waiting at a North Mountain.
Ah, so you know where we're going next.
Yeah, anywhere but North Mountain. Yeah, there's just no way we're ready for that fight. Especially not without Rena, who happens to be alive, and totally not brainwashed, as she sends the ancient library into the void, and then metamorphs into a sexy snake lady called Melusion. Yeah, totally not brainwashed. Okay, it's not like the game doesn't spell it out for you from the beginning. what with X-Death showing up to explain the whole monster possessing thing to us. Awfully nice of him to do that. This is one of those boss fights that likes to change what element it's weakest to, and there's supposedly a tell for which element it is depending on what direction she leaves the screen on, but I was too busy freaking out over how far back my last save was to really pay attention. Luckily, Butts was able to eke by with a win. And with that, the whole gang is back together, and it's off to the second lithograph. And off to the sealed castle, where using a lithograph allows you to choose 3 of the 12 ancient weapons that defeated Inuo. Again, whoever the hell that was. But hey, if it's the Excalibur and Masamune, then they can't be bad to have around, right? Also, I picked up the Holy Lance because fuck yeah, Dragoons! Meanwhile, X-Death summons Lavos, or opens more rifts to the void.
Naturally, the whole search for the lithograph quests opens the game up considerably for more exploration and side missions.
Also, new areas of the map have monsters who reward a crap ton of ABP, or job experience, which means... One such side quest involves going to Ferris's old pirate haunt and finding the spirit of her deceased Hydra, who offers up his spirit as a summon. Man, and you don't even have to fight him or anything. The Hydra is certainly more considerate than the other damn summons of this game that want you to beat the shit out of them to prove your worth or some BS. Like frickin' Odin, who, yes, is once again palling around the basement of a castle, and, again, requires you to beat him under a certain time limit before he instant gibs the entire party. Thank God for the toss ability. Even when spamming it, though, I'd say we're really cutting it close. Whereas the first lithograph dungeon was tricky and instilled a sense of preservation and decision-making, the second lithograph dungeon is just your standard dungeon crawling fare with a ventilation maze gimmick. And with the second lithograph is a hint to where to find the ultimate black and white spells in a place called the Fork Towers. 2 separate dungeons that must be defeated simultaneously, and therefore requires you to split your team into 2 separate parties. An idea they'll eventually take and run away with in the next game of the series. Not only that, but one tower has enemies that can only be hurt by magic, and the other with only physical. So the 2 sisters went magic. Rena having some skill in black, white, and time magic at this point. It turns out Geomancer abilities don't count as magic. Yeah, whoops. I mean, could have fooled me, and did. And Ferris, of course, being our summoner, leaving the physical-only side to Kryl the Samurai and Butts the Dragoon. Needless to say, the lack of white magic was once again felt. Oh, and hey, one of the bosses is the brother of that Minotaur guy. This dungeon really does a good job of teaching the powerful utility of mage classes. The sisters were casting protection spells and throwing lightning bolts and frickin' Norse gods at their foes. Meanwhile, Butts and Kryl just repeatedly hit things until they stopped moving. And for our efforts, the party obtains both the Holy and Flare spells. After that, the towers disappear, leaving behind the hideout of Sid and Mid, who then modify the airship to turn it into a submarine, as well as a boat and an airship. Meaning, it's time to do some exploration of liquid space. Like this underwater tower that only gives you 7 minutes to clear. It's actually not that bad, it's not like there's a lot of dead ends to get lost in. And the boss of this dungeon is... the hell? It's Go-Go!
I didn't even know he was a thing in this game, or that he looked like such a weirdo.
All he requests is that you mimic him, meaning do absolutely nothing.
But for shits and giggles, I decided to fight him, and...
Yeah, I don't know what else I expected. Winning this fight gives you the Mime job, which, instead of offering you new skills and perks from leveling up, allows you to instead equip any 3 abilities you've learned through job leveling. A neat idea, but I didn't find any use for it. Now on to the third lithograph, located on the Great Trench. Oh dear God. The hell are these monsters? Am I still playing Final Fantasy, or did I accidentally stumble onto one of those spooky fan ROM hacks? This is one hell of a change of tone. Oh, and in the center of it all is a dwarven kingdom. Why not?
Yeah, I'm going to assume that the eldritch horrors knocking on their door are the result of them digging too deep. Yeah, that's something dwarves are known to do, right?
The boss for this dungeon are these 3 weird-looking dudes whose gimmick involves having to defeat all 3 of them at once. Failing to do that causes them to do a delta attack and stone one of your characters. Well, if that's the case, then I guess I'll just have Odin slice the fuckers in half. Honestly, it wasn't what I was expecting when I summoned Odin, but I'll take it. Odin apparently has an instant kill ability that has a small percentage of going off. The interesting thing is, some bosses can even be affected by it. Just, food for thought. Nothing special to say about the 4th lithograph dungeon, however. Oh, except I encountered a frickin' Tonberry. Yeah, just as lethal as the ones in Final Fantasy VIII. Also, in this translation, they're called dingleberries.
Well, that's just fantastic.
Oh, and after getting the 4th lithograph, Leviathan appears to ask what's up. Weirdly, I'd take him over the dingleberry any day. Bahamut, on the other hand.
So there are 2 locations on the map that are only accessible via Black Chocobo.
Lest we forget this gorgeous specimen still exists. One being the North Mountain, where Bahamut is ready to throw down, and the other is the Phoenix Tower. A bit more complicated a place to navigate, as you can't see the stairways up the tower, and choosing the wrong invisible path forces you into a fight. There are also treasure pots on some floors that, again, choosing the wrong pot will force you into a fight. And these fights are just awful, like 100% RNG kind of awful. The reward for making it to the top, though, I'd argue is somewhat worth the hassle, as we get more backstory of Rena and her dragon. Rena's mother was dying from some kind of rare illness, where the only cure was the tongue of a dragon. In her desperation, Rena considered killing the dragon in order to save her mom, only to make the hard decision to spare him. Or rather, she's forced to spare him as her dad backhands her if you say yes like I accidentally did. Should really learn to stop mashing the A button during dialogue. After this bit of backstory, the dragon decides to erupt into a ball of flame and become the Phoenix Summon. Because that's a thing. It's a pretty sweet summon, though, that revives an ally while simultaneously damaging all enemies. And with that, all the side questing in the game is done. All that's left to do is enter the endgame and defeat Exdeath. So with nothing left to get sidetracked with, the heroes touch down into the end zone, a dungeon that takes you to various retreads of old locations, and a boss gauntlet against Exdeath's pals, like these robed old dudes, who I thought I was saving from imprisonment, but nope, turned out they're individual boss fights, or Catastrophe, who constantly uses Earthshaker, and if you have the wherewithal to cast Float on anyone, he has a spell that brings them back down.
I mean, I get that it's endgame and you want the bosses to be hard, but can I at least, beat the game?
Fortunately, I figured out that if you cast Reflect on someone who has Float on them, then he just constantly tries to defloat them in vain. Oh, and let's not forget this frickin' harlot who starts the fight by turning everyone into frogs. Yeah, it was a good thing I had one singular Maiden's Kiss on hand to cure Rena and start using her white magic to cure everyone else. And Twin Tanya, don't even get me started on this asshole with his Giga Flare bullshit. He seriously just gimps me within the first 3 turns.
Remember when I said that Odin's instant kill ability can also work on some bosses?
Yeah, the only way I think you're expected to get past this guy. Oh lord, there's also the Iron Giant? Oh, he's just a normal enemy now. Still a pain in the ass that hits like a truck, but I could actually beat him normally this time around. A bit disappointed I didn't get a card out of it this time though. But finally, after all the gimmick fights and instant death traps, the heroes make it to the final stretch of the game, where they run into Gilgamesh, who, I guess, spending time in the end zone has rattled a bit, as he has a weird monologue with himself before giving up on fighting the heroes altogether, only to later sacrifice himself to save the party from another boss fight, but not before giving the heroes a bit of a pep talk, reminding them to stay strong like Galuf and to stop spoiling the animals, thus ending the tale of the enigmatic Gilgamesh. Now it's time to finally face off against Exdeath, who the heroes are too late in stopping from obtaining full control of the void. Its awesome power turning him into an evil tree.
I mean, I get it. He was born from a tree or whatever, but I don't know. It's kind of a weird form for a final boss, don't you think?
What, do we get to crawl inside him too? He tosses the heroes into the void, but the original 4 Warriors of Dawn and Ferris and Rena's dad then show up, which is kind of weird because they're all supposed to be dead, and hold back the power of the void so the heroes can stop X-Death once and for all. Commence the fight against the weirdly phallic X-Death thingy. This fight, of course, is only the taste, as not long after, X-Death ends up getting engulfed in the void himself, transforming into Neo-X-Death, a being content to erasing all matter in existence, including itself.
Oh yeah, now this shit's getting crazy.
Much like a lot of the boss encounters in this game, this one requires some understanding in how the fight works, and actually being prepared for it beforehand if you want even the slightest chance of winning without just all-out grinding for hours. In this case, Neo-X-Death has 4 parts. The first part you want to get rid of is the goat head thing. See, that's the one that casts Ultra Gusts, which can easily end the game right then and there. The only break you can get from this overpowered attack is by casting, well, Break. Or in this case using Shoat, who can also petrify enemies. Once that thing isn't targetable anymore, you have to get the skeleton on the back, which at this point is probably throwing top level spells at the party. Though in a hilarious twist, the thing is vulnerable to instant kills, like Odin. Weird. That just leaves the dragon head and the demon dude, but hold on. If you leave only one section of the boss left alive, it'll start going apeshit and cast all of its high-powered spells at you. So the trick now is to try to divide the damage dealt to both parts as evenly as possible and kill them at the same time. Granted, the dragon head this whole time will be casting Grand Cross on the party, which is an ability that afflicts the entire party with random status ailments like Death, Petrify, Toad, Confuse, or even just straight up reduces a character's health to fucking 1. Oh, and when its health gets low enough, it'll start casting Meteor.
So even with all this knowledge and strategy, you're still just a single turn away from your entire team getting wiped out.
In this instance, only Kryle ends up truly saving the day, and only just frickin' barely. The heroes, though, find themselves still trapped in the void, knowing that the void will never be contained as long as there aren't any crystals left in the world. The heroes give up their own crystals and have them restored back to their true form on Earth, erasing the damage of the void. The Dawn Warriors and Rena and Ferris's dad say their final goodbyes before turning into a dragon, and then everyone starts to fall asleep? What? Kryle, I guess, is the only one who stays awake and grabs onto the dragon, which sends her back to Earth. While the rest of the world enjoys their new era of peace and prosperity, Kryle spends her days awaiting the return of the other 3 heroes, assuming that they'll somehow find their way out of the void. And, after a year of waiting, and after some cryptic and confusing dialogue from the heroes, they ride off into the sunset. The end. Final Fantasy V at the time had the auspicious task of continuing the series after the memorable classic that was Final Fantasy IV, and to some extent I think they succeeded, especially with the refined job system. As for the story, it certainly has its moments. Gilgamesh's story arc, Ferris's reveal as a woman, Galuf's sacrifice. The main characters in general are really well fleshed out and create an interesting dynamic with each other. Even the villain stands out, if not just for his cool factor alone.
Though I gotta ask, the hell kind of name is X-Death anyway?
Just more foreshadowing of the insufferable edginess that will eventually follow, no doubt. The rest of the story, though, it kind of feels like a chaotic mishmash of your standard Final Fantasy plot points. You've got the magical crystals, multiple dimensions, a formless void as the ultimate evil, the backstory involving a previous set of 4 heroes. It actually plays out the same way as Final Fantasy III in how it just sort of dumps all the convoluted exposition on you near the end of the game. Only now I can't even begin to follow along with what villain is doing what, who's alive or some sort of spiritual apparition, or what's an alternate dimension and what's a mind-bending voidscape. Granted, a lot of that probably has to do with localization.
I played the original PlayStation version of this game, and supposedly the localization isn't the best, but who can say how much of that was on the localizers and how much of that was due to the crazy shit that they had to work with from the get-go?
Despite all of that, it still holds up today as another Final Fantasy classic that any fan of the series should play. Final Fantasy IV may have led the series into the 16-bit era, but 5 set out to further perfect and revolutionize what a Final Fantasy game can be. But who would have guessed in 1994 how Square would end up topping themselves once again?